Hello, welcome back to Am I Neurodivergent, a video series recapping my unexpected autism and ADHD year. In last week's video, I talked about neurodivergence and assertiveness, how when we're on the spectrum we can oscillate between non-assertive behaviours like passivity, submissiveness and passive-aggressive, and then into flashes of aggression when it feels like people aren't getting us or aren't listening to us. Assertive behaviour is the kind of middle ground dream to aspire to set healthy boundaries and not let ourselves get trammeled over. But it's not easy to get there when you've spent a lifetime masking and trying to camouflage the fact that you're neurodivergent, whether you've known you're neurodivergent from a young age or whether, like me, you had no idea you were neurodivergent until later on in your life and you just learned to mask and camouflage as a survival instinct. This week, chapter 19, week 19, recapping my journey. Before we move on to other things that I want to talk about, I want to linger on a particular variation of one of those non-assertive behaviours I talked about last time that I didn't cover specifically in last week's video, and that's the concept of fawning, which we can very often exhibit on the autism spectrum, consciously or unconsciously, as an agreeable, over-accommodating survival instinct to negotiate the neurotypical world. Some of you watching this will be familiar with fawning, many of you might not be. I had never even heard of fawning until 4 and a bit months into my own journey of self-discovery, but I recognised it immediately. Week 19 for me, looking back at my journals during my kind of painful return to full-time work after having my stress breakdown, getting my ASD diagnosis, was when I first encountered the concept of fawning, and it was pretty eye-opening. Fawning is an attempt to avoid conflict or discord by appeasing others. It's a little bit like the passive or submissive behaviours we talked about last time, but rather than being an ongoing behavioural approach to things, although for autistic people it can be an ongoing behavioural approach, it's fundamentally a specific danger or threat response to a real or perceived threat or conflict. The initial articles I was reading on this were around animal survival instincts or danger detectors. So when our senses, sight, sound, smell, taste, or touch, detect danger, either real danger or perceived danger, the part of the brain called the amygdala gets activated and we zing into survival mode. I'm not going to get too sciencey, but the amygdala is part of the brain's limbic system. The limbic system does a bunch of crucial things like regulating emotions, memory, and motivation. The amygdala is part of that, and the bit of the brain responsible for processing emotions like fear and anxiety. When the amygdala perceives a threat or stressor, it activates the body's stress responses and initiates the release of stress hormones like cortisol or adrenaline. These stress hormones help prepare the body for a fight or flight response to deal with the perceived danger. So your heart beats faster, your breathing increases, and the fight or flight response kicks in. So tackle the danger head on or run away from it, basically. Everyone knows the animal brain fight or flight response, right? And how it translates to humans as well. But as time's gone by and it's been studied more, our understanding's got more nuanced, and we now know there are fight, flight, freeze, or fawn responses to danger. And look, much like some of the previous videos I've done, imposter syndrome, body-focused repetitive behaviours, a fawning response to threats or conflicts isn't exclusive to neurodivergent people, but it does seem to be a really, really common response to threats or conflicts with neurodivergent people. It's a form of social masking or camouflaging where you actively adapt your behaviour in specific ways to be more accepted and valued in a given situation. We hide our natural reactions to things in order to fit in and appear as normal as possible. For neurodivergent people struggling to survive in a neurotypical world, masking and fawning are just survival instincts, plain and simple. The danger or threat we feel is being seen, being found out, and being rejected, because others will see that we react to things and process things and deal with things differently to them. So in a threat situation, you can choose to fight, get aggressive, and try to exert your will over others. You can choose flight, to run away, to hide from the world, to remove yourself from potential conflict, or you can choose to fawn. Fawning can look like attempting to please or appease others at all times, needing to hear the thoughts and emotions of others before dictating how you present your own, the inability to say no that we talked about last time, and ignoring or squashing down your own beliefs, ideas, or values in favour of following other people's. Again, just to reiterate, you don't have to be neurodivergent to do this. There are all sorts of reasons neurotypical people might fawn: childhood trauma, low self-esteem. But when you look at some of the common signs of autistic masking that we consciously or unconsciously adopt, so like learning social cues from observing people in media, observing other people's interactions, matching the tone of our voice to others, mimicking others' gestures, hiding our own repetitive stimming behaviours or our hobbies or interests to not seem weird, developing a kind of bank of scripted responses to things to get us through interactions, or forcing eye contact and social chit-chat even when it makes us intensely uncomfortable to do so. Autistic masking and camouflaging is a fawning response, and fawning is a trauma response, and trauma is an autistic masking response. It's all circular. And if this sounds familiar and like you do this 24/7, or at least whenever interacting with people or the outside world, you might be thinking, but fawning's supposed to be a danger or threat response, not 24/7. But yeah, autistic people who are masking feel in danger or under threat from other people or the outside world pretty much constantly. Is it any wonder our anxiety levels, our exhaustion and burnout levels, our depression levels are all through the roof, and we often become isolated loners, unable to deal with day-to-day life and interactions with other humans? Masking or camouflaging, I can remember doing as far back as primary school, and many of us will be able to pinpoint similar things. So for me, when the other kids used to point and laugh at me for whispering before I spoke, I didn't really know why I did this, just that I did. And as I moved from primary to secondary school, I stopped whispering, but I guess I still silently mouthed things. And it was a girl I really liked in first year in my home economics class, I can remember it really clearly, who was watching me, I guess, acting what I thought was being normal and joining in with the class, but I guess still silently mouthing things before speaking. And she called me out in front of everyone and said, "Why do you practice what you're going to say before you say it? It's really weird." And I didn't have an answer, and I felt really embarrassed and tried really hard not to from then on in, and just practice what I was about to say in my head first. So I moved from whispering to mouthing to completely internalizing how uneasy and uncertain I found speaking out and drawing attention to myself. And it'd still be 30 years before I cottoned on that I was on the autism spectrum, and this was known as masking or camouflaging, and that not everyone did this level of practice and prep to what just comes naturally to others. But a lot of us try really, really hard to not make others feel uneasy and to not draw attention to ourselves doing things slightly differently. Excuse me. Just because we find it an easier way to be. And that is a fawning response. And hiding all this just to appear normal and not weird is exhausting. It becomes second nature over time, but the level of effort it takes never ever dissipates. And the masking, camouflaging, fawning behaviours bundle into the non-assertive behaviours we talked about last week to avoid conflict and discord and be over-accommodating to others. I've had so many occasions where I've been frustrated over knowing I'm right at work, for example, and not being listened to, but not being assertive and instead being all, "I'm not sure, but maybe X," or "I'm sure your way is the right way, but could we also consider Y?" And just letting other people steam ahead and doing things the wrong way when we can see so clearly that they're the wrong things, but we don't want to upset the apple cart. So we're agreeable and accommodating, and then we end up feeling a little bit bitter and sidelined. Even with therapy at this point in my journey, I was fawning. I was still on my first therapist at this point, and she was all, "You've done really well for yourself, and you should be really proud of what you've achieved." Being spoken to by a therapist, like autism is a disability rather than a difference, and state secret, a lot of therapists just aren't very good and just don't understand neurodivergence and will misdiagnose you with other things. For me, at this point in my journey, I wasn't wanting to be patronized or patted on the head like a good dog, and yet I kept fawning and just saying thank you rather than saying hang on and calling that behavior out as not what I needed. I was in this place of realizing, processing, and accepting I was neurodivergent, but for me, I felt like I'd underachieved my whole life, not like I'd overachieved. I was after new mechanisms to cope better and adapt better to my strengths, having finally realized there was a different user manual I should have been using all this time, not being congratulated for having just about read the wrong user manual pretty well for years and years. Where was the new user manual, and where was the new lane of traffic for us? I couldn't see it yet. So I said, thank you. I fawned, as usual. Thank you for saying I've done really well for myself. Thank you. I am really proud of what I've achieved. Like, ugh. I'll talk more, probably quite extensively, about my own experiences of masking and camouflaging in due course. But for now, I just wanted to get this kind of starter for 10 on fawning out there as part of this video series, to maybe start people thinking, whether you currently know you're neurodivergent or not, about whether this is something that you might do. Again, like BFRBs, if you're somehow coming to this video fresh as the first one of my series, please go back to chapter 1 in the series, take the AQ Self-Test, and have a think about whether you may be on the autism spectrum or be neurodivergent in some other way. Fawning, masking, camouflaging, I believe it gets worse over time, and you sequentially do yourself more and more damage the longer you go without realizing you're neurodivergent, whether that's getting a formal diagnosis or just self-diagnosing. Again, both are equally valid. And continue the fawning behaviors. It's that outward-facing imposter syndrome I talked about in chapter 7. We make ourselves intensely unhappy by living inauthentically, and we're crushing ourselves, or rather allowing ourselves to be crushed. And there's got to be a better solution than thousands upon thousands upon thousands of us getting diagnoses, getting therapy, and resolving trauma individually. Why are we all trying to resolve this individually when there needs to be collective societal change and two-way communication to all work better and communicate better collectively? It's a big part of the motivation I have for doing this video series. Most people can't afford months and years worth of therapy and processing, so I'm trying to help with recapping my journey. So we now know there are fundamentally two types of human brain, and we as a society need to be so much more aware of that and communicate and interact with each other so much better than we do now. There are millions of people in the autism spectrum worldwide, some of whom know they are, some of whom don't, who are fawning and masking and camouflaging and pretending to be and act like people they're not just to survive. But we're not surviving. We're miserable and we're burning out left, right and centre and denying ourselves the chance to be us. And all of this has to change so badly. Some guy on a hill once said, "Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth." Great stuff, but for now we'll settle for just sharing equally, or at least making ourselves more part of the conversation on level terms, because the earth's tanking and we need neurodivergent voices and different perspectives and solutions to be heard. Anyway, that's my 2 cents for this week. I did these last 2 videos the wrong way around, maybe. Fawning and trauma responses probably lead more into assertive behaviours, not the other way around, but just trying to get all my thoughts collected and pulled together will make sense of it all at the end. As always, I hope this was useful. captures my thoughts as I was going through the journey of realising I was neurodivergent and how it affected me. Maybe gives people something for them to think about, isn't getting things too badly wrong. And I'll see you next week for another one of these. Cheers, and thanks for watching.